Hello, world. A few years ago, I started a journey asking the question of what makes a Japanese person Japanese. Why would I, a Canadian, spend a couple years delving into Japanese identity? Well, my wife is Japanese, which makes our kids both Japanese and Canadian. In Japanese, they're known as Hāfu because one half of them is Japanese, so that kind of implies that they're not fully Japanese. In Canada, they can call themselves Japanese Canadian, half Japanese, half Canadian, or simply Canadian. Because as Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau so eloquently put it,
a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and the diversity of our country is actually one of our greatest strengths.
Take me for example. I've always called myself Canadian, but if you trace back my ancestry, I'm also lots of things. My father is of Chinese descent, but his family moved to Guyana over 100 years ago when they came over as indentured laborers. They'd been there so long that my father's sole language is English. And can I pause on this picture for a second and say that I've never thought of my father as a stylish guy, but man, he's looking pretty slick along with the rest of my aunts and uncles. But on to my mother, who is mostly British but was born in Belize. I say mostly because recently she found out she has some indigenous Central American mixed in, which means I do as well. Anyways, she grew up all over the West Indies with her family, and after marrying my father in Guyana, promptly moved to Canada and they became Canadians. Despite their varied backgrounds and having moved to Canada in their 20s, they could easily call themselves Canadian. I was born in Canada, so that makes me a Canadian, and no one has ever questioned if I'm Canadian or not, despite having such an eclectic background. My wife's story is much simpler. She was born and raised in Tokyo, and her family has lived in Japan for as far back as they can remember, with some claims to samurai lineage even. And, like me in Canada, no one in Japan has ever questioned if she's Japanese or not. But our kids, they are both Japanese and Canadian. So why is it, in Canada, if they call themselves Canadian, people won't question them? Whereas in Japan, if they call themselves Japanese, it's not accepted so easily. Perhaps it's because there are people like the former Prime Minister of Japan, Aso Taro, who have proclaimed that Japan is one nation, one civilization, one language, one culture, and one race, the like of which there is no other on this earth. So that got me thinking, what makes a Japanese person Japanese or not? Is it the blood that runs through their veins? A parent they were born to? The country they grew up in? Is it how they look? How they act? How they speak? To seek answers, I went to the far north, Hokkaido, to talk with the Ainu people who have lived on the land for thousands of years. I went to the far south, Okinawa, who've had many influences, from Chinese to American to Japanese. I went all over Japan and met with Zainichi-Koreans, whose families came to Japan from Korea generations ago. Nikkei-Brazilians, who returned to Japan after generations away. Hāfu, who have one Japanese parent and a strong connection to one another. Kikokushijo, who grew up partly outside of Japan and often feel like outsiders upon returning. Refugees, who may have been born and raised in Japan but can struggle to attain citizenship. And I met with naturalized Japanese, who became Japanese later in life. I met with all kinds of Japanese, who are Japanese, but it's complicated. So I went out asking the question, what is being Japanese?
日本人ですかって聞かれた時に私はちょっと違和感を覚えて、日本人だけどアイヌでもあるみたいな感覚があって、そういうのをこう自然にこう自己紹介の時とかにも、日本人だけどおじいちゃんアイヌで、だからアイヌ語とかアイヌ文化とかすごい好きなんだよね、それが私のルーツなんだよねってこう気軽に、それがアイヌだけじゃなくていろんな人がそういう自分のルーツっていうのを大事にして話すことのできる国家っていうのがきっと私の中の理想ですね。
So Maya is Ainu, and they are the indigenous people of northern Japan in the area now known as Hokkaido.
私は北海道のビラットリ町二部谷というところで育ったんですけど、ビラットリ町二部谷というところは人口の7割から8割がアイヌの血を引いていると言われているぐらい、こうアイヌ文化がこう強く残った地域で、文化だったり伝統工芸っていうのに触れながら育ちました。
The Ainu were there before the Yamato, or as they were also called, Wajin, who settled the mainland of Japan and became the majority of modern-day Japanese. The Ainu had a different language and a different way of life, living in small villages, hunting and gathering.
Ainu's community is really small. If you have 3 or 4 houses, you can say it's a kotan village. So with some that kind of characterization, with the number of the river, maybe the number of the Ainu is not so different from today, maybe 25,000 or so.
While they didn't officially become Japanese before 1869, they had been under the control of the Japanese Matsumaya clan for 300 years. So when the Meiji era began, the Ainu had already lost their autonomy.
At the end of the Meiji era, it's a kind of slavery system. Men have to go to seashore to work for Japanese people every year.
日本というかその日本的なものに合わせなきゃいけない。で、そのアイヌの風習っていうのはまあ禁じられていくわけですよね。まあ入れ墨を禁止とか、鹿とか鮭とか勝手に取っちゃダメっていう話もそうですし、農耕に慣れてないアイヌもその農業やれって言われて与えられた土地があまり良くなかったっていうような話とかもあったり、日本に組み込まれてから苦労したわけじゃなくて、もうこの時にはもうほぼ力を失っていたというか、随分と酷使されているような状態でした。だからアイヌ語を教えない、アイヌ文化を教えないっていうようなことがそこであったわけですよね。だから、その中でやっぱりそのアイヌ同士で結婚するなって言われた家もあるでしょうし、その言い方はあれですけど、その血を薄める見開きに2ページくらいですよね。アイヌについてその社会の教科書、歴史の教科書で出てくる。教科書に書いてるのはもうその歴史的な大きな出来事で、その数字でしか書いてなくて、多分それ以外の方が文化なのかなって思うので、もう教科書に書いてないこと全部いろいろ学んでもらえたらなっていうふうに思いますね。
To find out what wasn't in the textbooks, I traveled to Hokkaido, where Maya and her relatives were undertaking an annual collection of tree bark that will be used to make traditional Ainu cloth.
今日はまず家族みんなでおひょうはぎ、おひょうにるという木の皮をはぎに来ました。この作業っていうのも伝承していかないとダメなもので、でも1年に1回しかできない。今このようにこうアイヌだったりとかアイヌではない人とかもこうやって一緒にやっているんですけど、もともとこれはアイヌではないとできない儀式だとか、アイヌではないとできないものだっていうのではなくて、きっとアイヌの人たちはもう人間っていうくくりで人を見ているんで、なのでいろんな人がこうやって共同する形が本来あっていい形で、なので今回もすごいそれに合っていて、すごい楽しいというか嬉しい幸せなことです。
While Maya proudly identifies as Ainu and Japanese now, it wasn't so easy for her to do so back when she was young.
両親もアイヌとしてすごい有名というか、すごい活動してる2人だったし、おばあちゃんだっておじさんだってみんなアイヌのことを誇りに思ってそれを仕事にしている人だったんですけど、なので検索したら名前が出てきたりしてしまったりとか、メディアとかにも結構出てたんで、両親とかにテレビに出てもいいとかっていう確認をされるのが私の小学校で。
Not only was her family well known, but her father was one of the only remaining teachers of the Ainu language. Consequently,
それこそ小さい頃にアイヌ語の弁論大会とかにも出場したりしていて、でそこで最優秀賞をいただいたりしたんで、アイヌ語が少しできそうな子みたいな印象がきっと周りにもあったし、だからこそ期待されてたし、その期待に応えきれなかったりとかもして、
ちゃんとウパパヘネ、ウパシクマヘネ、グレード6ではエンコレヨー
それもやっぱりアイヌのことから一旦離れたかったとかもきっとあって、中学校ちょっと二部谷とは別のところに行ったんですけど、離れてみてやっぱりアイヌ文化っていうのが私にとって大切なものであって、両親もアイヌ文化のこと大好きだったんだっていうのも知れて、なので離れてみてよかったなって今だったらすごい思うんですけど、 でも中学高校とはちょっとだけそのアイヌとして生きるか日本人として普通に生きるかっていうところを結構考えたりした時期もありました。
On the opposite side of Hokkaido is Okinawa, Japan's set of semi-tropical islands. Like Hokkaido, it wasn't always a part of Japan. It was the Ryukyu kingdom, and Ryukyuans, like the Ainu, had their own languages, culture, and even a king. To this day, if you visit the islands, you can find remnants of the kingdom's many castles, including the seat of the former king at Shuri Castle. For a long period of time, the Ryukyu kingdom was a tributary state of China. If you're like me and don't know what a tributary state is, in the kingdom's case, they were allowed to remain independent but had to acknowledge China's superiority and send a regular token of submission, a tribute. In return, they received educational opportunities in China, as well as granted access to Chinese markets. They had the right to trade with China, something Japan did not enjoy. In 1609, the Japanese feudal lords of the Satsuma domain invaded the Ryukyu kingdom and made it into its vassal state. Alright, so I know you're asking, what's the difference between a vassal state and a tributary state? A vassal state is like a puppet state, where the rulers are allowed to stay in place, but the real power controlling the show is the puppet master. In this case, the Lord of Satsuma, on behalf of the shogun in Edo. So as to avoid conflict with China, as well as continue the ability to indirectly trade with it, the Satsuma domain had the Ryukyu kingdom remain a tributary to China. This is all a long-winded way of saying that while Ryukyuans were able to retain their languages and culture throughout this time, they were also heavily influenced by China and controlled by Japan. This changed in 1879, when the king was forced to abdicate his throne and the kingdom officially annexed as the prefecture of Okinawa. Over time, Ryukyuans, now called Okinawans, were forced to learn Japanese and adopt Japanese ways of life.
沖縄は内縄口ね、内縄口とも言うし島言葉とも言うし、それが普通の日常の会話だから、後から日本語っていうのは入ってきてますからね。いよいよ戦争が始まるし、日本人的な意識を持たせるためにも日本語を強制的に、私は方言をしゃべりましたっていう札を方言をしゃべったら掲げさせられる。誰が密告するかというと、立たされた人が密告するの、学校の先生に。みんな罰受けたくないからどうしてたかというと、聞いたのね、喋らないようにしてたって自分の島の言葉を否定されるっていうところにおいてはやっぱりみんな嫌な思いしたと思いますね。その日本語が正しくて島言葉内縄口は正しくないみたいなね、ようなことはやっぱりみんな嫌だった。僕が生まれたこの島は紫の地だ。日のように明るく陽気な人々。ありがとうは沖縄はミフェーデビル、ありがとう。で、宮古島になるとタンディガータンディ。石垣島行くとミーファイユー。全然同じありがとうでも単語が全然違うんです。沖縄県はね、島言葉を喋りましょうってテレビでも一生懸命今コマーシャルやってるんですよ。
おばあちゃんどうしたの
知るともっと優しくなれるね。
でもなかなか定着できなくて。
So, uchinaguchi. So, do you understand? Do you know what you speak it? Like, what's?
わからない。あんまりちょっとしか本当にフレーズわかんない。それも聞かないかな。話さないもんあんまり。ピカピカしたところ見て。わかる？ そのおばあちゃんたち同士ではうちな口使うけど、その孫とか話すときは日本語で話す。
Interestingly, I met Luna completely by chance. While meeting with a local professor at a cafe, she happened to drop by and share a meal with us. I thought she was one of the professor's students who knew about my documentary, and so I asked if she would help find locals to interview. Unbeknownst to me, she was only at the cafe looking for a job. But nonetheless, she kindly helped me both interview people and find interviewees, like her grandma. I guess that explains her favorite Okinawan phrase.
イチャリバ町でもうどんな人でもその時に会えばもう兄弟だし姉妹それはいつもある心には。
Anyways, her Obaa-chan was incredible, and when asked to introduce herself, went on a direct-to-camera 5-minute monologue.
名前は大城和子。年齢は85歳になりました。で、出身は北部なんですよね。沖縄の北部、ずっと北の方、35年間教員しました。とってもやりがいがある仕事で、今亡くなっても私は幸せな人生であったと自信を持って言える。ただ途中で実際の時に戦争を体験して暗い山の中をね、生まれたばかりの妹をおぶって逃げ回った。やんばるの山をねずっと逃げ回ってして妹は3歳になる時に餓死して亡くなった。おじいさんもマラリアにかかって亡くなった。だから戦争のことには非常に敏感。戦争のことは敏感だから、私が教職員のね現職の頃は必ず戦争と平和についてやっぱり道徳の時間なんか使ってね、非常に力説した。絶対平和でないといけないよ。これは沖縄の教職員が一番大事にしてずっと守り通してきた。戦争はダメ、平和。だから基地も戦争につながるものだから、とっても嫌悪している。嫌だと思ってる。
During World War II, Okinawa was the only inhabited Japanese territory that the US made landfall on. It's estimated that a third of the civilian population of Okinawa died during the war. For 27 years after the end of the war in 1945, Okinawa was administered by the US. During that time, Okinawans needed a special travel permit to enter Japan, as they were considered neither US citizens nor Japanese citizens. Yukihiro told me about his first experience traveling outside of what was then called the Ryukyu Islands to visit Japan.
幼稚園生の時に、母親に連れられて、東京に初めて来ました。船で、まだ通貨はドルなんで、沖縄で円に変えて、鹿児島の港でね、食堂に入ってカレーライス食べて。300円とかだった。300円で、うちのお母さんは円がわからないからね、バッグにあったお金全部バーッてテーブルに出して「わからないから取って」って言った僕は子供の頃にそういうすごい自分の母親が「わからないから取って」って言った時のここの鹿児島のおばちゃんのびっくりした顔っていうかね、忘れられないですね。
On May 15, 1972, Okinawa was reverted to Japan. The currency changed from dollar to yen, cars switched from driving on the right to the left, yet the biggest change that Okinawans were hoping for, the removal of military bases, never occurred. Currently, US military bases occupy 18% of Okinawa's total land.
アメリカ兵でも個人的にはいい人もいるけどね。
沖縄の人はアメリカ人に対してそういう反発を持っているというよりも軍隊そのものに反発してるんです。沖縄の人たちは沖縄チャンプルー文化ですね。みんなかき混ぜる。いろんな文化をね いいとこ取りっていうかね、仲良く生きていこう、生活していこうっていうのが沖縄の人の中にすごくあると思います。日本人という意識、感覚はもちろん持ってますけれども、それよりももっとやっぱり深いのはやっぱりうちなんちゅ。やっぱりそれはその島で生まれ育ったという、ごく自然な思いですね、うちなんちゅ。
私はね、根っからの沖縄人。日本人であってもいいんだけど、
Even though I have a Japanese passport, if there's Okinawan passport, I would choose.
In 1910, Korea was annexed by Japan. Under Japanese rule, many Koreans relocated to the main islands of Japan. They had Japanese nationality, and children were compelled to receive Japanese education. At the end of World War II, Korea's territories were reverted, and over 1 million Koreans were repatriated to Korea, but over 500,000 remained in Japan. When the Allied occupation of Japan ended in 1952, Koreans formally lost their Japanese nationality. In Japan, these people are called Zainichi-Korean or Zainichi-Korean. So before I could finish filming and editing this section on Zainichi-Koreans, a strange thing happened. One by one, 3 different people involved pulled out. One was helping behind the scenes, but 2 of them were people I was interviewing. Out of the over 50 interviewees I talked with, it's only Zainichi-Koreans who were initially on board with the project that decided it was best to not have their name or face attached. Why is that? I remember one day filming in Tokyo, near a busy train station, when I heard a little van with a loudspeaker that said, "We Japanese citizens, and this country Japan, will be gone one day."
Ultra-right-wing groups in Japan are going all out with hate speech rallies targeting ethnic Koreans.
Insults against Koreans fly across the streets of the Japanese capital, Tokyo.
So there's this small, vocal number of Japanese that will speak out against Zainichi-Koreans, but perhaps more scary is the anonymous people online who attack Zainichi-Koreans. I think it's this loud minority that my interviewees are hiding from. Instead of cutting out their experiences completely, and in order to keep their identities hidden, I had someone voice what they had said. To be clear, while the man I interviewed is indeed the real person, the woman you hear is simply retelling the experiences of Zainichi-Koreans I interviewed.
私は在日韓国人3世です。私の祖父母が戦時中に日本にやってきました。その当時は日本の統治時代で行き来できたのです。祖父は働きに来ていて、後に祖母も日本に来て、日本で子供を設けました。戦争が終わり、父方の家族は自国へ帰りましたが、生活環境は日本よりも劣悪でした。とても貧しかったのです。そこで日本に戻ろうということになりました。すでに日本の朝鮮半島統治は終焉を迎えていたため、船で密入国しなければならなくなっていました。でもその船はとっても粗末なものだったんです。その上穴が開いていたので沈み始めていたんです。乗っていたみんなは早く沈むぞと水をすくって捨てていました。私のおばは何の協力もしないでじっと座っている年配の男性を見つけたんですね。そこでおばは、おじさんもやってくださいよ、手伝ってくださいよ、何してるんですか？でもその男性はじっとしたままなんです。船が沈み続ける中、日本の漁船が通りかかるのが見えたんです。そこでみんな、助けてください、お願いしますと叫んだんですが、漁船の日本人漁師はきっと朝鮮人の集団かとでも思ったんでしょうね。するとその時じっと座っていただけの男性が突然立ち上がってポケットからお金の束を出したんです。そうしたら漁師が、分かった、みんな乗りなさいと。それがあって父が生まれ、私が生まれ、そしてみんな生き延びることができたんですね。
My name is Motonori Khan. That's my Japanese name. And I also have a Korean name, Wanda Khan. I'm a third generation Korean Japanese. When a lot of Koreans that migrated to Japan, we had to come up with a Japanese name to live like Japanese. And so we came up with Nishihara. Nishi is west, Hara is a field. You can say that the name represents Korea. Korea is geographically on the western part of Japan.
For early Zainichi Koreans, assimilating into Japan was often a necessity in order to avoid discrimination and to be able to access jobs. This would entail taking on Japanese names, speaking Japanese, and acting Japanese. This would mean that at some point in their lives, their children would find out that they're not Japanese, at least nationality-wise.
母が初めて私が日本人ではなく在日韓国人だと教えてくれたのはある日一緒にお風呂に入っている時でした。母は幼稚園に行ったらいっぱい日本人の子供たちに会うのよ。でね、あなたはね、日本人ではないのよと言ったのです。その時、日本人って何？と思ったのを覚えています。日本人じゃないの？同じじゃないの？と言っても母は違うと言いました。母は私に他の子は日本人なの。あなたは違うのよ。韓国人なの。と言いました。私には分かりませんでした。何が違うの？全く一緒の見た目じゃない。私は小指を見せて、これぐらい？これぐらいは同じじゃない？と言ったんですが、でも違うのよ。と言われたんです。
My father and my mother knows very little Korean. My grandparents decided not to teach Korean. Their intent was so that they can localize faster into the society. Being Korean back 60, 70 years ago was a tough time for them in Japan. So they probably didn't want my parents to experience the same kind of situation.
私は17歳の時、初めてたくさんの在日韓国人になったんですが、夏休みに私の父が私をサマーキャンプに入れてくれたんですね。それは在日韓国人の子供たちがソウルを10日間訪問するものだったんです。そのキャンプの最終日に参加者の女の子がやってきて、あなた友達に自分が在日韓国人だって言ってるの？と聞いてきたんです。私はもちろんよ、隠してないから、いつも言ってるからって言ったんです。そうしたら彼女は、本当に？みんなは何て言ってるの？ってとっても気にしてるんです。そして私は自分が在日韓国人だって絶対言わないの。でもいつかバレるんじゃないかって毎日不安なの。だから国籍を変えたいの。でも両親がダメだって言うから20歳まで待ってるの。なんて言うんです。それは20歳以下だと両親の許可が必要ですが、20歳になれば自分自身で国籍を変えることができるからです。私はどうしてと思いました。私はそれまで一度も差別を経験したことはありませんでした。だからなぜ秘密にしなきゃいけないのか全く理解できなかったのです。
I don't know how, but words get around and people find out. My school friends find out that I'm actually not Japanese and I'm Korean. And there was a stereotype bullying phrase and name callings back then to Koreans that we smelled like kimchi and garlic. When I was a child, that did hurt. But then again, I had lots of good friends as well. So kept my spirits up.
In 1908, the first Japanese started emigrating to Brazil. There was a shortage of labor on coffee plantations, and so Japanese farmers moved to work there, many to the state of São Paulo. Currently, Brazil is the country with the largest community of Japanese descendants, who number 1.4 million. Starting in the 1980s, during the peak of Japan's bubble economy, reverse migration occurred. Brazilians of Japanese descent, Nikkei-Brazilians, started returning to Japan. To find out more about Nikkei-Brazilians, I visited with Professor Oka, who teaches at the Tokyo Gakugei University. He was about to take his students on a trip to a Japanese city where many Nikkei-Brazilians work and live.
日系ブラジル人は、やはりブラジルに移民した日本人の子孫だということで優遇して定住者ってビザを与えて、それで日本の、工場とか自動車工場とか、電気工場とかで、今度行くブラジル人の群馬県の太田市とか大泉町っていうのは電気会社とか多いんですね。そこに結構ブラジル人が集まってるんです。 在日ブラジル人は、まずは出稼ぎで来てるっていうことだと思うんですけど、何年かやっぱり日本で働いたら、お金を貯めて帰ろうっていうことで、来てて、それ工場とかでやっぱり固まって住んでるんですよね。ですからそこではあんまり日本語使ってなくて、日本語あんまり使わなくてもその一つのコミュニティができてるんで、そこで働いて。
I worked from 2016 to until last year. I work at a factory for like 12 hours a day. But the work itself is not the hardest part. It's like you're in a different culture because even though I grew up with a Japanese father, I grew up in a different environment. So you kind of think you're Japanese until you get there, because it's really strange. Here in Brazil, people used to call me, "Oh, look, it's the Japanese. It's that Japanese guy." And there in Japan, we have this problem because we Brazilians refer the Japanese as Japanese than who we are. It's really strange.
Hello, my name is Erika, and I'm from Brazil. Yeah, so my mom's Japanese. She doesn't have a Brazilian citizenship. She's in Brazil since she was 8 years old. And also my father, he's Japanese. They don't have Brazilian citizenship, so they both have a Japanese passport.
So Erika came to Japan to work, but unlike Tetsuo, who found factory work through a temporary employment agency, she has a white-collar job and transferred within her company. I interviewed her via video a month before she arrived in Japan. Why is it you're going to Japan, I guess? Why are you moving?
Okay, so actually my husband received a job offer to work there as an engineer. So we thought it would be good for his career, and actually he really likes Japan.
You are Nisei, right?
Yes.
Oh, right. Nisei means second generation. So Issei would be first generation, Nisei, second generation, Sansei, third generation, and Yonsei, you guessed it, fourth generation. Okay, and so how was your Japanese?
Non-existing. Because like my parents came to Brazil when they were children, but my mom just learned Portuguese when she was an adult, like when she was 24. So she actually made some mistakes, and I think my father, he was afraid that we might learn something incorrectly in Portuguese and, I don't know, mix up letters. So he said that she shouldn't talk in Japanese. So that's why we didn't learn. When I was a teenager, I told my father, so I think now it's time to learn. I'm not really keen on Japanese, but I think it's like I should. And he said, no, just study more English because Japanese is useless and it's too difficult and etc. He said it's just a waste of time. But it happened and now I need Japanese. Like I'm very nervous because everything will be new. Like I don't have any friends there and I don't speak Japanese. And my friend in Tokyo, she said, just come here and say that you're a foreigner. Don't say that like you're learning. Don't say that like it's not important for them that your parents are Japanese, because then you should speak Japanese. So they will get confused, like you do a lot of odd things. And so that's my main concern, like being accepted, because like it's very different. It's very different.
In my first month in Japan, I tried to find community Japanese language classes where Japanese volunteers, mostly seniors, would teach us Japanese. And they were really kind toward me. Every time they bring snacks. Most of the times, Japanese were really kind toward me and accepted me. I don't know how they perceived me, if I was like someone who can grow as a Japanese, or maybe just a Brazilian who's really working hard to adapt to their culture. If people came to me and spoke like, you're not Japanese, I would say, yeah, I'm a half Brazilian, half Japanese. Like I have both cultures, so deal with it.
It often seems that being Japanese is a yes or no thing. You're Japanese or you're not. However, there's a term for those that have one Japanese parent, Hāfu, as in half Japanese. Some Hāfu don't like this term, as it can make them feel like they're half a person. So there are those that would rather be called daburu, as in double. But of course, some don't like that term either, since it can be taken as they're twice as good as someone else. More practically, many Japanese don't know the term dabaru, so the term Hāfu is what most use by default.
They marked it wrong. So I was born in the US and raised there, so all my banking information at the time was US Bank. So I remember having a little bit of embarrassment when I would go to like an ATM, for example, at 7-Eleven, put my bank card in, you have to select the English option. The voiceover is like, welcome. And everyone in the area, I was afraid like, oh, they can hear this and they'll know that I'm not actually Japanese. And I felt, it's so silly to think about it now, but I wanted to just be Japanese, or what my mind thought, you know, a regular Japanese person was. So I didn't like the fact that everyone could hear that. And it's so silly when I think about it now because, you know, I do speak Japanese, I do speak English. I am from America. I don't really have to be embarrassed about any of this. So I don't really worry about it now because I am both.
My name is Naomi. 岩沢直美です。日本とチェコのハーフで、多様性の違いを楽しめるように、そういうことで、活動しています。My name is Naomi. I'm Japanese. My mom is from Czech Republic and I grew up in Japan, Germany, and Hungary. I'm here in Japan working on embracing diversity.
お寿司食べたい。
私は自分が日本人だなというふうに感じたのが、初めハンガリーに行ってからなんですね。つまり6歳、7歳。自分はこれまで日本人として日本で過ごしてきたし、幼稚園の当時は特に直美ちゃんって違うよねって言われることはなかったんですね。だからなんか違いがあるなんて意識したこともなくって、でハンガリーに行くと、インターナショナルスクールだったので、みんな自分はどこどこから来たっていうことをやっぱり主張して、だからこういう自分は文化を持ってるんだっていうことをこう共有し合うような空間だったんですね。私は日本人だ。でも母親はチェコ人だから、でもチェコ人だなっていうふうに考え始めるようになりました。日本に帰ってきて、日本人じゃないやんっていうふうにこう自分の国に帰りやっていうようなことを、クラスメートから言われるようになって、で私でもやっぱり日本人だなと思ってはいても、なんか靴箱の中に泥が入っていたりとか、体操服がゴミ箱に捨てられてたりとか、こう髪の毛茶髪やからそんなんあかんでっていう風に引っ張られたりとか、ピアスを引っ張られたりとか、こういう私は背景があって、だからピアスをしてるとか、地毛がこういう色なんだっていうことは伝えても、なんだろう、こうずるいっていう気持ちなのか、羨ましいなのか、憎いなのか、どういう気持ちが、それぞれにあったのかはちょっとわからないんですけれども、そういうことを経験しました。で、その後中学校ドイツだったので、やっとここから脱出できるというような気持ちだったんですが、ドイツから脱出すると、それはだいぶまたインターナショナルスクールで環境は違っていて、またその自分はこういう国から来たということを堂々と主張できる。Yuki, Karen.
But something happened when Naomi returned back to Japan for high school. She reunited with friends and teachers from elementary school and was surprised to learn that many of the students who were interested in studying abroad are learning about overseas. You see, back in elementary school, her parents had offered workshops about cultures around the world. And of course, Naomi talked about herself as well. She felt that the exposure to different cultures at a young age helped shape the views of her fellow students in a positive way. She then started an organization called Kalmani, combining the words culture and harmony, wishing to build a society where many cultures harmonize with each other. She went on to tell me about one of her experiences inviting international guest students to give a workshop in a school.
ハイチ、イスラエル、韓国の留学生ゲストを連れて、それぞれのゲストの文化を知ろうっていうプロジェクトで小学校を訪問したんですけれども、見慣れていないというのもあって、その黒人の子が入ってきた時にちょっと泣いて逃げちゃった子もいたんですね。で、面白かったのが丸抜ゲームをしたんです。で、これは全く予測していなかったことなんですが、お箸は日本でしか使わない丸か×かとか、なんかね、丸ばっかりなんですよ。で、よく見ると黒人の子が×を持ってたの。なのでそっちに近づくのがちょっと怖かったみたいなんですね。で、ちょっと迷っている子たちも、でもな、みたいな、この×の丸寄りのところにいたりとかして、面白いなというか、もちろんね、その子たちがその黒人嫌いとか、黒人差別をしたいみたいな気持ちは全くなくって、で、そのね、ゲストはすごく子供慣れしていて、遊ぶのが上手だったので、もう90分、1時間半もしたら、すごい慣れて、子供たちも背中に登ったり、髪の毛チリチリじゃねえなんて言って話して遊んだりはしてたんですけれども、なんかその経験って、小学校1年生、2年生、3年生、だから泣いて逃げても、ちょっと怖がっても避けても、すぐに乗り越えたり、しょうがないよねって思ってもらえたりするものかもしれないけれども、なんかそういう経験が若い頃、小さい頃にあればあるほど、なんかいろんな多様性に対する価値観とか、違いに対する恐怖とかっていうものが取り除かれていくのかななんていうのは、なんかすごく感じるエピソードだったんですね。
May, where is Japan? Yes. And Kota, where is Canada?
ベトナムのカナダに逃げちゃった。
Yes.
My name is Tetsuro Miyazaki. I am a Belgian Japanese photographer. Internet connection here sucks. こんにちは。こんにちは。哲郎です。よろしくお願いします。I'm the photographer of a photo project called Hāfu to Hāfu, which is about mixed race Japanese identity worldwide.
And as a matter of coincidence, Naomi was pictured as part of Tetsuro's project. He's taken 120 photos from Hāfu from almost 100 different countries combined with Japan.
So I meet people. We have a 1-hour discussion. It's a very open talk about who we are, where we come from, what issues we face. What we have in common is what we discuss, and then what separates us, what makes us different from each other. And at the end of this conversation, we try to distill, if you want, one single question that kind of summarizes the whole conversation or the main topic of the conversation.
どういう見た目がハーフだと思いますか?
And that's what I put in the book. Most commonly, when we talk about Hāfu in Japan, we talk about white, Japanese, bicultural people. You speak 2 languages, maybe 3 or 4. That's the common image we have. Some people who are half black and half Japanese do not identify as Hāfu because the rest of the world doesn't see them like that. I want to redefine the image that we have of what is a half Japanese person and what does he or she look like.
Hi, I'm Monique. I was born and raised in Japan. My dad's African American from Tennessee, and my mom's from Tochigi in Japan. So my high school is right over there, and then that area, that building there is the food court. Everybody can eat there. And then that tower over there is the Nanaban Tower. I was there until I was like maybe 10. So I was born off base here in Yokosuka, and so I was able to get my American citizenship through my father, since he was already American, and then my Japanese citizenship through my mom. You know, looking back, I guess it was a very unique sort of experience. I didn't know because that was all I knew at the time. Constant, like literal transition from one community to the other, one language, one culture to the other, generally needing to be ready to bridge connections between people or, you know, whether it be incidents or just kind of opportunities. That was kind of my role. So I always found myself being the translator, like even for field trips in 3rd grade. The Yokosuka community is very used to having the military around. It's been around for, you know, since World War II. So when they see someone who looks like me speaking Japanese, they assume it's because my mom's probably Japanese. You know, being here was kind of like being in a bubble. People are used to like people like me. And I imagined when I moved to New York that perhaps like I would just kind of get to be myself, whatever that meant. But it turned out that wasn't necessarily so. It became a little bit more complicated, I guess. And when I first moved to New York when I was 18, my hair was stick straight. And at that time, I was very attached to that. And I felt like if I didn't have that hair, people wouldn't imagine that I was Japanese. Like they wouldn't think that I was. And that was like very important to me at the time. People thought I was like Polynesian. People thought I was like Indian. And then some people who were also like half Asian and half black would find me on the street and we would look at each other. We'd be like, oh, are you half black, half Asian? We'd get really excited.
Monique had so many interesting stories about her interactions in the US, but this one with a visiting Japanese student at an education conference was surprising to hear.
When I started speaking to him in Japanese, he was like honestly creeped out. And he literally used the word grotesque. Yeah, I mean, poor choice of words, but like that was really like, whoa. But, you know, watching Japanese television, I could see how you know, Japanese people might be led to sort of imagine people who don't look Japanese, who speak Japanese, to be like curious creatures or just kind of like something fun to look at, sort of.
Why Japanese people? Why? Next!
And so I really hope that more Japanese people can become familiar with just kind of, you know, Japanese speakers can look very different, whether or not they have Japanese blood in them or not.
名前はジョー・リバーです。お父さんがアメリカ人で、海軍でしたね。で、お母さんは日本人でした。日本で育ちました、ずっと37年間ですね。で、僕のことを自分のことを定義するとしたら、地球人ですね。日本では日本人とは思われてないです。外国の人からは、西洋の人から特に日本人としても思われてます。周りが僕のことを勝手に決めるので、僕はもう地球人としてしか言えないので、なので皆さん勝手に決めてください。僕は地球人です。
Joe was incredibly fascinating to speak with as he grew up in Yokosuka, the same area as Monique, although she lived on base while he lived off. Their experiences, while only separated by a few years and a number of blocks, were drastically different.
で、僕が生まれた頃にはもう2人は離れ離れになっていて、ただ僕はもう小さい時からお母さんに一人で育てられてきましたね。小学校入るまでは幸せだったんですよ。日本の保育園行ってたんですけど、人種差別ないし、だから幸せですよね。6歳までは。7歳から地獄です。高校3年生まで。長い12年間でしたよ。小学校1年生の時から3年生の時まで、断続的ではあるんですけど、周囲の、大人たちに、リンチされたりとか、殴られたりとか、おしっこかけられたりとか、とにかくひどい思いをしてきましたね。僕だけじゃなくて、お母さんもそういう周囲の人たちに、傷つけられたり、傷つけられそうになったこともあって、それこそなんか黒人のなんかね、性器が好きだとか、もっとひどい言葉を言われたりとか、小学生たちにも黒人のことが好きな女だよな、お前の母ちゃんはって言われたりとか、僕は小学校2年生の時に小学校6年生の子たちに、 みんなの前でリンチにされたりとか、羽交い締めにされてね、別にもう一人だけじゃなくて何人にも殴られたりとか、まあそのおしっこかけられたりとか、まあ、牛乳かけられたりとか、チョークで体中塗られたりとかね。僕のようにそういうねミックスドレイスの子供の気持ちを先生たちが分かってくれてたかって言ったら、ちょっとそれも怪しいかなと思う。であとその警察にお母さんと一緒に行ったことあるんですよ。でも警察に言われたのは、いやいやアメリカ人との間の子供だから仕方ないだろって言われましたね。お前がアメリカ人の子供を産んだからだろって。だから米兵にしか助けてもらってないです。米兵だけですね。たまたま通りかかった米兵に、まあ、僕がそうやって大人たちとかにそうやって殴られたりとかしてる時に、たまたま米兵が通ってそれ助けてくれて、でその助けてくれた米兵たちも白人もいたし黒人もいたし、そう中にはその僕のために泣いてくれる白人米兵もいたりとかして、まあ、彼らだけでしたね助けてくれたのは。やっぱりその東京の外国人がたくさんいるところでもし僕が育ってたら、多分横須賀で受けた人種差別の経験はしなかっただろうし、もっと違う経験をしたんじゃないかなと思いますね。まあ、なぜかというと僕が東京に17歳から東京で働いてるんですけど、東京で人種差別されたっていうのないですからね。他の地方の出身者の人に僕はこういう話をしたことあるんですけど、みんな考えられないって言うんですよ。だからその言葉がやっぱ嬉しかったですよね。だからまあ僕が経験してきたことがやっぱりあまりにも特別すぎたっていう感じですよね。だし日本人が聞いてもおかしいってみんな言うから、そうだから本当に運が悪かったわけです。
So for model shots, do you always have to do imagine, or do you like? I don't think so. Okay. Right. So at the age of 17, Joe became a model. He started working in Tokyo, found a more international scene, and his life changed for the better. The next group of Japanese I'll introduce is Kikokushijo, or in English, returnees. These are Japanese that spent part of their childhood outside of Japan. In many ways, they have a lot of similarities to the Hāfu I interviewed, as they too are living between cultures. While they have two Japanese parents and look typically Japanese, they often have difficulty feeling completely Japanese.
私は木内稔です。日本の国会議員で今国会対策副委員長をしております。I'm 54 years old and I lived in West Germany from 1971 to 1975. So when I came back to Japan at the age of 10, I had trouble with Japanese writing at elementary school. And I also had some trouble fitting in because 5 years in Germany made me more assertive than my classmates. I felt I am half Japanese and half German, but now I am 88% Japanese and 12% German. So I think naturalized Japanese citizens are really Japanese, just like me.
I'm fairly sure that the 88% Japanese, 12% German bit was a joke about the precision of both Germans and Japanese. But who knows?
This record is made in 1930s in Japan, before the World War II. Did you know that at that time many Japanese people loved American movies and jazz? Western style. 私の友達のジャズピアニストです。
Hi everyone, my name is Kyoto Tsuji. I am currently a third-term Dai member of the Japanese House of Representatives.
Tsuji-san was of particular interest to me, as he grew up for most of his childhood in Vancouver, where my family and I used to live. We're actually both the same age, and his English name in Canada, Andrew, is in fact my middle name.
At the age of 4, our family immigrated to Canada because my father, who was a Japanese Canadian, wanted the kids to grow up elsewhere, not Japan. From junior high, a lot of my friends became non Native Canadians who immigrated from Hong Kong and elsewhere to Canada to study and eventually go on to good universities. And these kids taught me that I was Asian and Japanese. They're good friends, but these colleagues, students, would expose me to Japanese comic books, Japanese movies that I didn't know. And they would say, hey, you're Japanese. Why do you act Canadian? You're Asian. And we're Chinese, and we know your culture better than you, and you should be ashamed of yourself. So that's when I entered a very, very big identity crisis, a dilemma. Some of these Asian kids would call me a banana.
In case you never heard it before, banana is a term used to describe someone who's yellow on the outside but white on the inside, like a banana.
I started thinking to myself, hey, how about Japan? Maybe that is an option that I never thought of. And I consulted my mother, and she never thought I would ever return to Japan. So she said, no, you probably won't make it because they'll probably alienate you because you look Japanese, but you're not Japanese. If you look different, maybe they would treat you better, but I don't want you to go through hell. That was literally what my mother told me. And I told her, hey, you'll see what I can do. Because I never wanted to give up on something. I didn't even initially think of climbing that mountain, but if they told me I cannot do it, then I was like, hey, I'll do it.
So Chichi-san returned to Japan for college and said it was his first exposure to Japanese culture. His main difficulty was that
other Japanese people didn't realize my differences. I was like an English book with a Japanese cover. So many people judge the book by its cover. And initially they would say, oh, he's interesting. But after a few weeks, they realize this person has not read the same things, has not spent the childhood that these people can relate to. So gradually your phone stops ringing. No one would bully me or no one would treat me in that way, but they would just, every time I smile, they'd smile. But that's it. I couldn't relate deeper. It was very, very modest, but you feel that difference. In a way, it's very racist. Very racist. And every culture has its own racism. I feel. I don't want my kids to experience what I did, It's just too tough. But no pain, no gain, kind of.
Hi, my name is Honomi Ijima. I'm Japanese. So I was born in Kanagawa Prefecture, and I basically grew up in the same area until I was 13.
So, I have to cut in and say that I filmed Honomi next to a busy train line, and it was noisy, so I'll tell part of her story. Like happened to many Japanese Kikokushijo, her father got transferred out of country for work, and her family ended up in the Bay Area of California. She attended local schools and said she got the complete American experience. Part of that was having to introduce herself, to which she always said, I'm so-and-so and I'm from Japan. It drilled into her that, yeah, she was a Japanese person. So it's in America where she realized that being Japanese was part of her identity. After 3 years at the age of 16, she returned to Japan and went to a regular high school.
And in a way, that was a bigger culture shock for me because, here I was coming back to Japan, feeling more like a Japanese person, like more aware of that kind of cultural and ethnic identity. And then here I was back in like the usual, like old stomping ground, and then feeling so like isolated in a way and feeling so disconnected. And it's like, what is this feeling? Like, I feel like I'm here, I'm back home, but I don't feel like I'm back home. And that's when I started to kind of think about like, what does it mean to be a Japanese person? Like, what makes me Japanese? Like, is it because I'm born here and I grew up here for a certain time? Is it because my parents are Japanese? but then like how do I feel so out of place?
Like Honomi, I think everyone I interviewed asked that same question. Who am I? What is being Japanese?